On the 26th of August, 1346, the fields near the small town of Crécy became the stage for one of the most decisive clashes of the Hundred Years' War. There, an English-led coalition of English, Welsh, and allied troops under King Edward III faced the full might of a far larger French army commanded by King Philip VI. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Edward made a bold decision. His knights and men-at-arms would fight on foot, forming a solid defensive line. Behind them, early English cannon, primitive but terrifying for their time, were positioned to disrupt the oncoming French advance. In total, Edward commanded roughly 4,000 knights and men-at-arms, 7,000 archers, and around 5,000 spearmen. To strengthen their position, the English dug defensive ditches and scattered caltrops along the front. One flank was shielded by forests and marshland, the other anchored by the small village of Waudecourt. Edward then divided his force into 3 distinct divisions, ready to withstand whatever the French could bring. Across the field, the French host, somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 strong, arrayed itself in wave after wave. Leading the vanguard were the mercenary Genoese crossbowmen. Behind them gathered heavily armored knights and men-at-arms under the Count of Alissa, while King Philip himself commanded the main body. Among the French ranks rode a legendary figure, the blind King John of Bohemia. But fortune was not with the Genoese. They had left their protective pavises behind in the baggage train. As they advanced, a sudden rainstorm swept across the battlefield, rendering their crossbows wet and ineffective. Still, the French signaled their ruthless intent. The sacred Oriflamme was unfurled, declaring that no quarter would be given. When the Genoese began to falter under a storm of English longbow fire, the French cavalry, enraged by what they saw as cowardice, cut them down as they attempted to retreat. What followed was chaos. Wave after wave of French cavalry charged uphill into a wall of arrows, ditches, and pikes. As many as 15 assaults broke upon the English line. Bodies of men and horses piled high as the ground turned into a killing field. At the center, the division led by Edward's 16-year-old son, the Black Prince, came under immense pressure. At one point, a messenger rode to Edward's position, marked by a windmill, seeking reinforcements. The king refused, uttering the now famous words, "Let the boy win his spurs." In one of the battle's most tragic and symbolic moments, the blind King John of Bohemia requested to join the fray. His attendants tied their horses' reins together so he could ride with them into battle. Charging straight into the English line, all were pulled down and killed. King Philip fought valiantly, suffering injuries and losing horses beneath him twice before being forced to withdraw. With his departure, French resistance collapsed. The battlefield fell silent. The English suffered remarkably light casualties, around 300 men. The French, however, endured a devastating loss, more than 1,500 knights slain, along with thousands of infantry. Among the French dead was John of Bohemia, whose body the Black Prince later found and honored. The sacred Oriflamme itself fell into English hands. At Crécy, strategy, discipline, and the deadly longbow shattered the might of French chivalry. It was a turning point, one that reshaped medieval warfare forever.